Hello, boys and girls. How are you today? It is Barbara coming to you from St. Nicholas in Wilkes-Barre. I'm here for our Bible story today. I am Mr. Joe's wife who runs Faith Formation at St. Nicholas. And I'm going to tell you a little bit today. I'm reading from a different part of the Bible. My story today comes from the Old Testament in the Bible. So the Bible is broken up into two parts. The first half is the Old Testament, and the second half is the New Testament. The Old Testament is all about stories before Jesus was born, and that's where my story comes from today. My story is about a man named Elijah, and Elijah was a prophet, and a prophet was someone who heard God speak, and he shared what he heard with the people. He helped the people to love God and to know God, and basically he was a messenger of God. And that's Elijah. That's who we're going to read about today. While Elijah hid in the cave on the mountain, the Lord asked him, "What are you doing here?" Elijah told the Lord all that had happened in Israel. "The people have forsaken your law. They have thrown down your altars and even killed your prophets. I am the only one left," Elijah said sadly, "and now they want to kill me." God answered, "Come out of the cave and stand on the mountain." And Elijah obeyed. God caused a strong wind to sweep across the mountain. Even the rocks crumbled. But Elijah knew that God wasn't in the great strong wind. Then God sent an earthquake, and the ground trembled beneath Elijah's feet. Still, Elijah knew that God was not in the earthquake. When the ground was steady again, a fire broke out on the mountain and burned many trees. But Elijah knew God was not in the fire. When everything was quiet after the fire, Elijah heard a still, small voice. At once he knew that this was the voice of God. Wrapping his coat about his face, he stood in the doorway of the cave to listen. But God asked him again, "Elijah, what are you doing here?" And Elijah answered the question just as he'd done before. But God said, "You're wrong, Elijah. There are 7,000 people in Israel who are good and who still have not forsaken me." How surprised Elijah was! He began to take heart, and God said to him, "Elijah, go back to Israel." And now Elijah was not afraid to go back to Israel. He did as the Lord commanded. So in my story today, a lot of big things happen. And a lot of times we think God is in the big things. We look for God in big places, like things like people suddenly getting better, or like things like the sickness ending, and we look for the big. But we have to remember that God is really more in the small everyday things. But we really need to listen and look to find God in those small things. So a big thing, like I said, would be the end to the virus and everybody is all healthy and well. We could all go back to our regular life and go back to school and outside. And that's a big thing, and that's great. But right now, we have to look for God in the little. So maybe family time, all this family time we're getting to have because we're all together, that's God in the small. Getting to eat meals together. I know I have eaten more meals with my entire family than I ever have in the last couple of, maybe the last year, because we're always also busy and we're often spread out. And I have a daughter who's away at school. So now we're all together. And so we're looking for God in that. Sunshine, being able to be outside on a nice sunshine, a warm day. Look for God in that small little bit of being able to play outside. A phone call. Maybe grandma calls or grandpa calls or your friend calls and you get to talk to them on the phone, or you FaceTime, or you do one of those classes and you get to see everybody. Seeing God in the small, in the little things that make us happy. Maybe your pet jumps up on your lap, rubs up against you, or your cat sits and purrs. Finding God in those small, small moments. That's what we have to look for. So I want you all to think the next days ahead as we're leading up to getting ready for Easter. Look for God in the small things. And heck, if you have a God moment that you see or you think you hear God, have mom or dad put you on Facebook and you can comment on the bottom of our story. I'd love to see where you've been seeing and hearing God. little things we have to look for every day. And it's hard sometimes because we don't sit and listen, but we can. And God is there for us if we look and listen for those little things. We're going to get ready for Palm Sunday tomorrow, which starts our Easter week, leads us into the crucifixion, and then eventually on Easter Sunday, Jesus' resurrection. So we're going to do a special Bible story on Thursday at 1 o'clock, and we're going to talk a lot about Jesus and the crucifixion. And then on Saturday, on Holy Saturday at 1 o'clock, we're going to do our next story, which will be the resurrection. So I really hope that you'll tune in and listen and watch us. Whether you watch me live or you watch me afterward, that's great, just so that you can get ready for Easter Sunday. I know a lot of us are missing being able to be at church and celebrate the masses with our church friends and church family. I know I am. I can't imagine Holy Week at home, but it's going to be a wonderful thing if we make it that. So let's make it that. Let's get together and we'll do our stories. And I hope you like today's story about Elijah. And I hope you give me some examples of where you heard or saw God in the small things this week. Bye.